call to order this meeting of the Arlington ISD Board of Trustees on December 11th, 2025, beginning at 5:08 p.m. The first item on the agenda tonight is a workshop, and we'll turn it over to Dr. Smith.
Trustees and staff, thank you for being here tonight. We've got a fun one, I think, to talk about some important topics for us. First, to get us kicked off tonight, we're going to take a look at an enrollment outlook, but a bigger picture. Bob Templeton is here from Zonda Education. Bob and I have worked together for a number of years now in various districts, and Bob is considered one of the state leaders in demographics and demographic study around the state. He presents often. He did a presentation for us at the Texas School Alliance about a month and a half ago. And based on some of that information here, maybe it was 2 months ago now that I think about it, I asked Bob if he would mind coming and sharing some of that information. I asked you to really think about this. We're thinking about enrollment and the changing landscape of public education. And I think it's important because we're in the middle of some really important work as a school district to expand our thoughts and to really think about what the future might hold for public education. And Bob is going to lead us through that tonight. And then so right after that, Kelly and Michael are going to walk us through some things with our facilities condition assessment. Some of you have heard some things about it. You've gotten some information that we've shared with you. But just to give you an overview of the executive summary of big work that was done and to make sure the whole board is on the same page regarding some of that work and some of the information we got. That's the purpose of our workshop tonight. So I'll turn it over to Bob.
Well, thank you, Dr. Smith. It is good to be with you tonight. I love coming to board meetings. I'm probably unique in that. This year I will have eclipsed 1,600 board meetings in my career. I've been doing this for almost 25 years, and this is my third board meeting this week. I did Northwest ISD on Monday night, Colleen ISD on Tuesday night. Here I am here. Next week I've got Fort Bend in Houston, and back up to Needville down in Houston, and then Keller. But I say all that because I do see a lot. I am still very engaged in what we do. I can tell you in my 30 years of working with school districts, this year is the most challenging, and it's challenging on a variety of points. It's not just one thing. And when we talk about the enrollment outlook, the enrollment landscape, it's not just one thing that's affecting our enrollments. It is multiple things, and it truly is the perfect storm. It is a challenging housing market. When I say a challenging housing market, it's the cost. The cost is high. The interest rates are still high. It's a barrier for young families and for those first-time home buyers. But on the flip side, just a few years ago, we had the lowest interest rate that we've probably seen in 40 years. That wasn't that long ago. It was in 2001. The interest rates were 3%. And we had massive amounts of people that bought homes and refinanced. Those homeowners are staying put. They are not going to sell or move to a different home because they've got this really great interest rate, and the housing cost is keeping them to stay put. Those are just examples of some of the challenges. So it's the housing market, it's the birth rates. We've talked about birth rates for a while. So the birth rates are not a new issue, but it is still creating some challenges. And I am very blessed. I have 2 children. I have 3 grandkids from one. But my brother has 4 girls. 0 in his group. And those girls are 21 to 30. And when I talk to many of my friends, they're in a very similar situation. These birth rates are locked in. They're not going to change. And that's just the way this generation and future generations are likely going to continue to form their families. Now, but the biggest issue is the expansion of choice. So I want to touch, here's a map of school districts in Texas. There's over 1,000 school districts in Texas. That bar graph is showing you the annualized enrollment change. Prior to the pandemic, we were growing 30 to 60,000 kids a year, fastest growing state in the country. We're still the fastest growing state in the country. But you'll notice in 23, our school enrollment in public schools only grew 12,000 kids, despite being the fastest growing state in the country. that number really should have grown about 30 to 50,000 kids. But the choice mindset has already started. So even though the vouchers haven't gone into effect yet, that mindset has already shifted. Last year, we only grew 13,000 kids. My prediction is last year's enrollment across the state, that 5.5 million kids, that is going to be the state of Texas's peak enrollment in public schools. From this point forward, it's only going to go down. Now, when I say that, I'm basing that on a couple of things. Prior to the pandemic, I was looking at the grade level state numbers. So this data is available by campus, by grade, for the whole district, the whole state. And in 2019, the kindergarten, state total enrollment for kindergarten was 29,000 kids larger than the 12th grade class. So that's just an automatic growth of rolling up bigger incoming kindergarten classes versus the exiting 12th grade classes. Do you want to guess what it was last year? Negative 29,000. Last year, the 12th grade class is 29,000 kids larger than the kindergarten class. So now I've got the opposite issue already with our numbers. And a piece of that's the birth rate, but a majority of that is the choice. It's the impact of choice that's already started. It is the charter schools, a little bit the private schools, but in my view now, it's the homeschooling. The homeschooling numbers are really growing at a pretty tremendous rate. Now here's the charter school data. We've got about 970 charter schools operating in Texas. The charter school enrollment last year was about 435,000 kids. You can see how it has grown every year, anywhere from 12,000 kids. They had a peak growth back in 2020 when they grew 29,000 kids. But I don't see the charter's future. They're still going to grow some, but a charter school experience is pretty much a typical Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. It's 100 and so many days a year. It really is a very similar schedule to a traditional school experience. But the area that is seeing the most growth is the virtual. So the virtual learning is growing. These are the state of Texas virtual enrollment numbers. These are the Hallsville, Huntsville, Grapevine, Colleyville, Fort Stockton. If you look at your TEA transfer report for Arlington ISD, I suspect you will see some of those districts like Hallsville and Huntsville, Fort Stockton. That's their virtual enrollment. And so even though they don't live in those areas, they've been choosing that for the last several years. Now I know that's about to change because of the recent legislative passage on the allowance for virtual programs to spread. So those districts are going to end up having a change in their online learning because it's going to be happening everywhere. But look at the jump. That jump was strongest last year. It grew from about 42,000 in the 23 school year to over 57,000. There is a appetite for the virtual learning, and it's really all about flexibility is the primary thing that's they're seeking. We have started tracking private school enrollments. We track it by the Region Service Center. We've got about 1,900 private schools operating in Texas. Now, these are the accredited private schools. You know, not all private schools are accredited, but the accredited ones, there are about 1,900. There's an enrollment in those accredited private schools of about 339,246. That number is growing just a slight bit. But when I think about the voucher implementation, I don't know that immediately we're going to see huge numbers going into privates because a lot of the private schools that I'm tracking and following and researching, like Fort Worth Christian, like the Cross Timbers, they're full. They really don't have huge amounts of capacity to draw. Now, I do think over time we will see additional privates come online and start expanding, but initially, I don't know that we're going to see huge numbers there. The other thing that we're tracking is when you think about the tuition, private school tuition is a lot more than $10,000. So now I know some of them may offer some scholarships and they may have a sliding scale and they'll do some things there. We're also getting wind that there's some private schools that are not going to participate. They're just not even going to accept the vouchers. It's going to be really interesting in a few years for our leaders in legislative leaders that have this great idea for vouchers and then the private schools don't participate. I wonder how that's going to play in the future. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But right now, those tuitions, in this example for the school on the rise, it's $17,460. That's the tuition for this one. This AHB, their tuition is, their tuition is about $13,950. Plus, they've got a Friday. They're a Monday through Thursday private school, and if you want Friday, you got to pay an extra $2,300 a year, and so you can see these tuitions are well above $10,000. Now, I want to reference this great homeschool convention of Texas. Our team has attended the last two of these. When we got wind of this, I'm like, I got to go. I got to be in that room. I want to see what's happening, and we attended every session that we could attend. This is a 3-day conference. There are, I would say somewhere to the tune of 30 sessions, and they fill up the Kalahari Resort, completely fill it up. About 7,000 in attendance at this conference. We actually geofenced it so we could capture the mobile locations of where were they from. It was fascinating. They came from Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio, Houston. It was matching up with the population patterns, exactly. And we interviewed 2 to 3 families in every session that we attended. We had a series of questions, and some of the things that stood out to me from this past experience was there is that religious worldview position that is some of that homeschool group, but it is not the majority. It has shifted. It is now more about flexibility. This group that we interviewed, a majority of them, did not have a beef with public education. No beef, no problem. They're not mad at public education. That's not what's causing them to jump to the homeschool approach. It was the school day. It was the school week. It was the ability to, next month, one of the parents is off for 2 weeks. They want to go to the coast, and they want to be able to move their education to match their flexibility in their schedules. That was number one. Now, there was this desire to participate as, being involved with them. But the other thing that jumped out, the majority had multiple kids. This was a multiple kids facilitating kind of challenge. And they were going, man, I got 3 kids, and they're a 6-year-old, 8, and 12. And the logistics of getting them to school was really problematic, and so we're all about the homeschool. But this homeschool movement is rampant, and these conferences are like a revival. They are pumped. They have some power speakers. There's entertainers. It's very festive. They bring their kids, which is why the Kalahari is such a great spot, because one of them is playing with the kids and the other one is going to the sessions. And whenever we would watch the crowd, these moms would leave the sessions and go to a table and immediately start, processing, planning, and organizing. Now, they have a trade show or an exhibit hall. The trade show exhibit hall was packed. 130 vendors in this space, and they are buying stuff right and left. It's not like going to Midwinter, where when you go to Midwinter or you go to the Tassie trade show, you're walking and talking, and there's really not much transactions happening. It's really about just networking and about visiting. Not at this. They are buying stuff hand over fist, and it's just a full-on event. Now, what are the homeschool numbers? What do we know about the numbers? In Texas, it's hard to quantify the homeschool numbers because we don't require them to report. But when you look at the homeschool withdrawals from the schools in Texas, you can see how prior to the pandemic, it was staying pretty consistent at about 26,000 a year of homeschool withdrawals across our Texas schools. But look what happened in the pandemic. It shot up dramatically, but then it did drop back down, but it's still well above what it was. Now, I visited with one of our clients in the DFW area, and I asked them to give me their homeschool withdrawals over the last 3 years. That's what these numbers are right here. So back in the 22 school year, they had 420 homeschool withdrawals during that year. In 23, it jumped to 490. In 24, it jumped to 520. Through October, it was already 267. This is definitely going to more than double. And so this homeschool withdrawal pattern is growing and expanding. Now, some put the homeschool number across the country at about 4.2 million kids in homeschools across the country. And when you break that down by state, of course, California has the highest, but Texas has the second highest amount of homeschoolers. This source, the Admissionly source, is using census data to get an estimate, so it's still just an estimate. They're putting it at about 440,000 kids in homeschools in Texas. When we have researched and found the Texas Homeschool Coalition, they're saying that about 8 to 10% of the school-age population is in homeschool. Now that 8 to 10% represents about 500 to 600,000 kids. So whether you're looking at 440 from the previous one or this number of about 500,000, it's more than the charter and more than the private. So this really is the biggest draw out of public ed is the homeschool group. Now, a couple of months ago, and this is really what led me to start putting this PowerPoint together, I was listening to a podcast and they were interviewing Vela, the founder of Vela. They were interviewing her and I was like blown away. And this is a education foundation. I would call it one of the smaller education foundations. When I say smaller, it's about a $24 million foundation. They've issued out about $24 million in grants. They are not a school. They are not an academic program. They exist purely to start micro schools or these hybrid learning environments. And that's when I really kind of caught wind of the micro schools. We heard about micro schooling at the conference, that homeschool conference, but really they were referring to it more as co-opting. So these were homeschool co-ops. But a micro school is a founder, so it has a founder. They may have 1 to 2 staff members. They start with about anywhere from 20 to 30 kids, so they are small, but we are seeing them grow. In some cases, they're growing to about 150 kids. So far, what we're seeing on the micro schools, that's about the max on the micro school, about 150 kids. Now, many of the micro schools are charging tuition. Also, of the micro schools across the country, only about 20% of them are accredited. Most of them are not accredited. How do they handle accountability? They don't deal with accountability at all. And they claim that, or at least some of the resources that I saw will say, we leave accountability to the parent. They put it on the parent. So however the parent wants us to be accountable, does the parent want us to use a certain testing or to use some other form to gauge accountability and success? So they say, we'll work with the parent on accountability. And then they'll fall back and say, really, they're choosing to enroll with us is the accountability. Because they're welcome to leave or welcome to choose something else. But Vela exists to form micro schools. They do work with homeschoolers, homeschool co-ops, hybrid schools. So there is not one type of school that Vela would be supporting. Now, I mentioned Stand Together because that's another education foundation. This is the Charles Koch Foundation. So Charles Koch, one of the richest men in the country, a billionaire. So he is pouring in, millions of dollars into education, alternative education. prior to several years ago, he was a supporter of charter schools. Now, from what I can tell, and I've looked at the donor list for Vela, the biggest donors to Vela are the Walton family, the Kellogg's, and Charles Cobb. So those are the founders. So they're now directing their funds towards these micro school approaches. Now, these micro school networks are all over the place. Micro schools network, it almost feels like a pyramid scheme or franchising, because in just about all of these micro school websites, there will be a link to start your own. Contact us, we will help you. Now, the micro schools are targeting founders. These founders can be teachers, so they are going after our teachers to start micro schools. When they see an award or a newspaper article or some kind of attention to the Teachers of the Year, they're going to be going after them. They're going after them, and then they're going to be tempting them with, wouldn't you like to create your own environment where you can teach how you want to teach? And then in the end, it can be more profitable. They can make more money as a micro school teacher, and they have much more flexibility in their school day. They may only work 3 days a week, maybe work 2 days a week. But this micro schooling is really surging. This Texas Sports Academy, this is another example of a micro school. Are you familiar with the Texas Sports Academy? Mr. Hill is? Okay. They are a 6 to 7 hour school day. They are 5 days a week. But they only spend 2 hours a day on academics. Two. Their afternoons, pure athletic, pure training, skills development, and it's whatever sport they're going to be leading them into. But this Texas Sports Academy is for those families or parents that have this dream that their kids are going to be Division I athletes. It's for that group specifically. Now, as we've gotten into this, and I stumbled on this through LinkedIn. I was on LinkedIn several weeks ago, and I saw an ad for a construction manager for 2 hour learning. If you Google 2 hour learning, 2 hour learning is the platform that these micro schools use. The Alpha schools, the Nova schools, those are Austin heavy micro schools. They all use the 2 hour learning. And when you go to the Alpha School website, you're going to see this amazing video of this child student that's leading this video, and you would swear this is an actor. It's that good. It's very compelling. But the 2 hour learning is advertising for a construction manager. You would guess what the salary was listed at? $400,000.
How's he only?
$400,000 was the listed salary for the construction manager for 2 hour learning. And in the description it says, we have 30 planned facilities that we're planning to open. 30. And these are primarily in Texas. But the 2 hour learning also had a job listing for an interior designer. $200,000 salary for an interior designer. Now, this is for real. This is hardcore. Now, the 2 hour learning uses AI. It is an AI heavy. Now, who knows how successful that's going to be? It's hard to gauge and hard to know. But what their claim is that these programs are so tailored to the individual student that the AI will morph or change the program based on the involvement of the kid. So it truly is a customized approach. And this founder is purely just a coach or a kind of a mentor or it's not teaching like we think of teaching. But it's very, very heavy into AI.
Is it K through 12?
Most of the ones that we found are K-8, but they are starting high schools. Now, that Texas Sports Academy, I believe, is K-12. It's all grade levels. But these micro schools, look at this, Grow your micro school. Start your micro school. Find your micro school. They make it very easy on social media. And it was amazing. Once I started researching this on Instagram and Facebook, what do you think happened?
You're getting it
All the time. I mean, it was constant. And then I'm thinking, well, what if I was a parent that did that? If I was a parent that did that, I am just flooded with this other information, these stories. And then I'm like, how do we get our message in there? How do we fit the best solution into the view of our parents? Let's see. Now, Enrollment Catalyst, they're a firm out of Florida. They exist purely to help privates and charters to grow their enrollment. And they offer training. The other thing that I saw that they focus a lot of their resources on is the social media campaigns. And when I actually called their vendor, and I had a demonstration with their social media vendor, and he walked me through how much it costs and how they do it. And so I was working with Fort Bend ISD at the time, and I said, well, pull me up Fort Bend ISD. Let me see what all is happening in Fort Bend. There were 15 campaigns going on from the charters and the private schools that are running 24/7 all the time. 15 charter campaigns that are running on social media. And it's like, even when the school district, when a parent goes to the school district's webpage, these ads will pop up on the school district's ads on the site. And I'm like, now, in order to get that replaced, it's really all about the money. It's about, well, if you want to get your ad on there, then you've got to pay a higher fee to get, higher visibility through these channels. Now, what he was telling me was, and now I'm drawing a little bit of a blank, but it's somewhere between $15 to $50 a day to run one campaign. $15 to $50 a day. Now, that might not seem like much, but if you're a charter school and you've got 100 seats to fill, or 75 seats, it's really a dollar's game. It is a dollar's game to where they're going to invest $15,000 to run this campaign until those seats get filled. And then when they fill the seats, they'll stop the campaign. But they literally are turning on their marketing to meet the seat occupancy. Well, we don't think like that in the school systems. We set our ratios, and I say that, I don't know for sure if you're doing that or not, but the charters are, and the privates will be if they need to. These micro schools will be as well. Okay. Struggling to fill seats? We help K-12 schools get seen, get leads, get students in the door without chasing families down. The thing that also jumped out at me was the real purpose of all these campaigns was to get them physically to the school. They were creating ways to get them to the school, and then guess who was selling the school? The students. These students are trained to lead the tours and to be the ambassadors. How compelling is that if you're a parent that's got a third grader and you're walking in and a third grader's going to show you around and tell you about the school? I'm like, it's brilliant. But they want to get them to the building. That's the key, is getting them to the building. You've done everything right, but enrollment is still down. Most schools don't lack value. They lack the visibility and the systems to reach families consistently. Now, again, I have no clue what Arlington is doing in terms of these strategies. But this is just, as I've been studying and watching this going and just asking the question and wondering, what are we doing? Because we really do need to get in this space, and we need to start figuring out how to but tell our stories and get our message in that environment. Meta ads. Run those ad campaigns under your schools on Facebook and Instagram profiles, not an aggregated marketing plan. They will also geo-fence where to run those ads. So you're not just running them globally across the DFW market. No, these groups will set up a geofence to where the ads will funnel in to that geography. Automated tour scheduling. So again, it's all about getting them to the campus. Once I get families in, I can sell my school. We just need more leads. So key takeaways. Invest in tools to track student mobility. You know, our firm has always looked at newcomers to the district and leavers. So we've looked at mobility in those two factors. We've now added a new one, returners. I now want to see who's returning. Another term for that is boomerangers. Now, we often think of boomerangers as the kids that come back home after college. But boomerangers is also a workforce term. So Zonda, we've got about 1,000 employees in our company, and we have town halls every quarter, and every quarter they announce who's new to the company, but they also highlight the boomerangers, and they celebrate the boomerangers that are coming back. And I think we need to do some of that as well. We need to really celebrate our new to the district. How do we recognize new students to the district, new families? I don't know. Do we recognize them in some way? Do we recognize or even know about the boomerangers? But you can use GIS tools. There's platforms out there where you can geocode, see who's leaving, check the mobility, and that would be very helpful. Student mobility is newcomers, leavers, returners. Expand your marketing campaigns. You know, this is hard because it's money. And so how much money can you tie to this? But for every 100 kids that you can get, that's, what, $700,000? For every 100? Rough math there. So I think there is a sweet spot where we can figure out what is that, what's the target, when do we do it, what's our message. New data using geofencing and mobile location data. Mobile location data is the new hot thing. Mobile location data can give you demographic information. It can give you consumer segmentation. It can tell you a lot because your cell phone is leaving a path that the data firms are collecting and monetizing. It doesn't matter where you go. It doesn't matter what your setting is on your phone. It knows every place you go. Then they're tying the consumer spending to it. And then anything that's on Facebook, I had this company run it on me just so I could see what he would pull up. He pulled up my Instagram picture. He pulled up how many times I'd been to H-E-B, the grocery store. He pulled up all of this information about me to where then he could develop a consumer profile of me. And so that's why these political campaigns target you with certain messaging, is because they've already done all that. And they know where you may have done your voting location. And they don't know how you voted, but they know some of those things. They know which primary you may have voted in. And so geofencing and mobile location data is a new source of really great data. Enhanced service approaches. A book that I would recommend is called Unreasonable Hospitality. It's kind of the hot book right now, and it is really a fun read as well. It's about the restaurant industry. It's about a restaurant manager in New York and how he took his restaurant to become the #1 restaurant in New York. It's a good, entertaining read, and it does have a lot of valuable information. Expand your surveying to get feedback and support. The surveying is not just about the information you get. It also makes that other person feel better. Or can. It can. You know, every chance I get, when Marriott asks me to do a survey, I do it. And I'm an advocate for Marriott. I love Marriott, and because I do that, they reward me. You know, so there's a benefit there. But I think we need to think through about how we're using surveys, because we can get feedback, but it also can gain us some support. Express gratitude as often as you can. I think school districts do a pretty good job with the gratitude, especially when it comes to kids. You know, just about every board meeting that I go to typically starts with recognizing student achievement. A lot of times the parents will be recognized with that as well. And so I think we need to try to expand our gratitude. And we need to think that, you know, when we think about our customers, who are our customers? We automatically go number one to the kids that are enrolled. We go to the parents of those kids, but we don't necessarily think about all the other customers. Our taxpayers' customers. Well, they might be, but they are participating. So recognizing the variety of customers that make up a school district's customer portfolio, because it's more than just the kids and the parents. Now, I'm closing with Ernest Shackleton. Who is familiar with Ernest Shackleton? A couple of folks. Ernest Shackleton was a British explorer in the early 1900s. He led an expedition to cross the South Pole, Antarctica. And during that era, that was a big deal. That was kind of famous, and he left with 27 men, and as soon as they got close, their boat got stuck in the ice. They had to survive on icebergs for a year and a half, and not one person died. It is considered one of the greatest leadership and survival stories in all of history. A year and a half on the South Pole, on Antarctica. And when you read that book, I've read the book, and it is incredible. But he says difficulties are just things to overcome after all. No doubt we've got difficulties in education. It's the housing market, it's political tension. I really didn't spend enough time on the political tension, but we've seen great changes because of the political tension. And, the school districts are not getting their recognition that they deserve. And so we've got to really tell those stories. I think, we have to be creative. The other example that I love is the Chili's turnaround, Chili's restaurant. If you haven't researched that, that's another example of some really a great turnaround is the Chili's turnaround. Chili's started just down the road in Dallas, and they've made a remarkable turnaround. Now, I know that was a lot, and be happy to answer your questions. Let me say one more thing. These enrollment challenges, while they may be felt here, they're happening everywhere. So I was in Killeen. Killeen's enrollment dropped 1,400 kids this year. And my forecast for Killeen, unfortunately, is for that to continue. And they're building 800 new houses a year. So they're like, why are we not growing? Why are those 800 houses not turning into 400 kids? And it is a combination of all those things I mentioned. It's the low birth rate, it's the expansion of choice, all those things are at play. But it is something that is happening across the country. It is not just a DFW thing. It's certainly not just an Arlington thing, but I think it is the new reality. So the new reality is our enrollments are going to be declining because this expansion of choice is really just getting started.
Trustees, before we move on to looking at our facilities condition assessment, any questions for Bob? Any thoughts on your mind?
Should we consider trying to do some kind of partnership? I mean, if they're going to go, they're going to go. But maybe we could get, maybe we'll do the fine arts and let them come in for fine arts or whatever it is. I think if it's going to happen, we can't stop it. We need to find a way to partner, to get with them.
I think we need to be creative and think of ways that we can partner with them. I think because in their minds, they're taxpayers. And many of them are. Many of them are taxpayers, and they're like, if we're not careful, then we automatically alienate 10%. 10% of our population could be adamantly against any initiative that we're trying to get support on. And that's just the homeschool 10%. Then you do the private school, that's another 5%. Then you do the charter school, that's another 5%. Before you know it, you've got 20% of your population that they don't see any reason to support public ed. But I think that finding ways to get creative, and I know this is a funding issue really, is how can we get some funding for a student that's not enrolled that may be only going to take one or certain number of credits. In talking to, I believe, Justin Terry and Forney ISD is exploring that if these homeschool families take an online credit or two, then they can participate in extracurricular. So they can't just do extracurricular. Now, don't quote me on that. I talked to Justin, but I have heard him talking about that kind of approach, that if they take these online, then they can do the extracurricular. But I think that's worth exploring to see how can we.
I think we have to put everything on the table as we're, again, getting into facilities and planning for the future over the next couple of years. We have to really think about our traditional models, I think, and figure out what's going to be right for Arlington ISD for the future of the families that we serve. But we have districts across the state right now that are expanding virtual academies, figuring out how they open up their own micro schools, basically taking a wing of a school and creating homeschool co-op opportunities within that school. So I think we have to figure out how we might be shifting our model long term. Don't know what that is yet, but that's the purpose of this presentation is we're in a spot where we have to start thinking differently. And so we've got to get that ball rolling as we plan for the future.
You know, one thing to keep in mind, the enrollment, there's several ways to address declining enrollment. There are some districts that are immediately taking the approach of we got to close schools, and they're taking a real fallback, retreat in that approach. I'm not saying that's just my observation. That's been their approach. I think there also, though, we can go on the offense. We can create more communication. We can create some different types of experiences. So there's two ways to go about this issue. It doesn't have to be just one way. And so that would be my encouragement, is for you to think through your facility planning in that, because our facilities are going to be way better than these micro school. They're going into an old retail space. It's like an old grocery store or an old dentist office. You know, they're making that work. But we have some advantages that we need to take advantage of. Our fine arts, that's an advantage. Now, the other thing that we're starting to see, we are seeing a return. We're seeing a return in those middle school grades where, yeah, they may have done this homeschool, this micro school, fun little thing while the kids were little. But then as the content gets more challenging, when you need a lab, when you want to do some more, robust kinds of topics, the return is starting to be seen at middle school. It's also fine arts and it's athletics. So I think we'll see a new cohort emerge where this may become a new reality, is that they come back in upper elementary, middle school grades.
And what about colleges? I mean, are they accepting the grades from homeschool, or how is that going to work?
Okay, this needs to be a whole other presentation. That's great. The enrollment cliff that I just described that's happening in public ed, the enrollment cliff is about to happen at the college level. So their enrollments in colleges are about to plummet. Now, these same groups that are promoting micro schools and promoting this hybrid learning are doing the same thing at the post level around the trades. The trades. Mike Rowe, are you familiar with Mike Rowe, the Dirty Jobs guy?
Yeah.
He's all about promoting the trades, and there are groups that are building these trade training centers to train electricians and plumbers and framers in the trade industry. So there are groups that are doing the same thing at the post-secondary level. Now, I do think the universities, though, ultimately their entrance requirements are going to change because they're going to become so desperate for enrollment. And maybe not the big ones, but a lot of the others are going to be hurting for enrollment.
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Kelly, there's dangerous steps over at the elementary.
Over at Keith.
Over at
Is there a
had me scared with this. I'm like, oh my God.
Give it to Kevin. I heard it.
Dangerous.
Give it to Kevin.
Mm. I stayed. We're staying. Hey, Brooklyn. You gum. See, I knew she was everything.
She has 100 pounds.
I consolidated. See, there she is.
I'm gonna be nasty. I'm just gonna talk to you.
I'll just switch to the first slide.
Right.
No.
I know. Check. We got that one.
She said this is in honor of my birthday.
The guy that's
Our new ISD.
somebody actually running. They're all going now. Just getting a bunch of them. First things up. I'm
Thank you so much. Maybe she can pick it up.
I learned well. I'll meet you there. All right, let's go ahead and get rolling if we can, because we got 15 minutes now. All right, Michael and Kelly, let's take it away.
All right, thank you, Dr. Smith. We're here just to kind of continue that presentation. As we go into this work about facility condition and assessments and all of that, I want to look at it through two lenses. One, the high beam, probably 10, 12 years down the road, and then one, the low beam, or initial 3 to 5 year assessments or needs. Kelly, next slide. So what I'm going to do is kind of set the stage, and then Kelly's going to take us through the details of everything. Chris, if you'll hand out those two presentations. We partnered with Corrigan to kind of do a facility condition assessment of all of our facilities in the district. And so what Corrigan did at first with our partnership is the first document you have is what's called a educational adequacy assessment standards. And so what we did is we sat down and we determined what the standards that we wanted were for all of our facilities. So we partnered with Corrigan and said, okay, we want these many classrooms per student enrollment. We want the classroom to be this size and storm shelters and all of that. And we set that standard with them. And then after that standard was set, then Corrigan, along with our staff, took that standard and went through every one of our facilities and measured our facilities against that standard. That assessment yielded those 8 binders back there over several thousands of pages of assessments and data that basically said, here is where you are, AISD, building by building, according to the standard that we set. What Kelly's going to walk you through now is the state of school facilities, which is this document, which is a summary of those 8 binders. And so Kelly will take us through that very briefly and see kind of how we landed where we are and kind of like what the next steps are.
So there's a lot of data and a lot of information. This is the high-level summary. So as Michael said, there's almost 12,000 pages that were developed across our district. In Sam Houston alone, I think I mentioned this before, the various groups, over 440 pages of just information on Sam Houston. So they looked at every single thing they could find that was any kind of deficiency, whether it was critical need or whether it was something that was simply a PM or preferred inmate. So all that's kind of rolled up in that one document that you see that Michael mentioned, the state of school facilities. And so just some I'm not going to read everything on the slides, but because you got this as well. But just real quickly, for what we did, just on the facilities, this isn't athletics or transportation or any of the other groups, it's just the facilities over $1.8 billion worth of need. Okay, our average FCI for the whole district is 26%, which is pretty good because we started in 2019 at over 30, just about 31%. So we've made a tremendous amount of headway with our schools, and you're going to see that in some other slides here in a bit. But a good range, so it's not bad to be at 26 because a good range is 25 to 40%. And we've got schools you're going to see that are even lower. And we've been on a lot of tours, both the CDOC and CNSC. And so if you've been on those with me, we've talked a lot about that. Even last week when we went on the tour, a little mini tour, if you will, inside 3 schools, and we saw 6, right? We drove by another 3. So it's not bad to be at 26%, but we still have schools, just like with utilization. You're going to see we've got schools that are higher, much higher, and we've got schools that are really low because of what we've done to invest, or maybe they're new, like a school like Webb, Salt River. So Michael mentioned this. We always develop our needs based on kind of 3 bond programs. In this case, though, instead of 3 5-year programs, or master plan for 3 5-year programs, we're kind of looking at a 3-year program, and then a 5-year program and another 5-year program. If you remember when we did this in 2018 or the 2019 bond, we did the same thing, right? So for those things that we had in that we called priority 1 in the 2019 bond program, if it didn't make the priority 1, it went to a priority 2 or priority 3, which meant it was pushed out to another 5-year program or a third 5-year program. And Michael mentioned as well, this really involves 3 pieces of information, right? The first piece of this FCA is, of course, the setting of those standards, those adequacy standards. And those are done by a couple of things, right? Number one, we use TEA. TEA has standards for everything. We do take that into account, but as a district, you, the board, set other standards for this district, right? And so that meaning we want things like storm shelters in all of our schools, regardless of whether we might be making additions that would qualify us to that. You've said we want that to happen. You've also said we want all of our kids out of temporary buildings and into the main building. So we've worked really hard to do that over time as well. Through this process, I'm not going to go over each of these, but I'm going to touch on a couple. The assessment's the big thing, right? Michael mentioned that. It's a lot of information, and we didn't print that for everybody because you don't want it on your shelf. But we wanted you to see what to pay for. It's a lot of work. But the assessment in general meant district-wide, we took probably 200 of our people along with Oregon's people and the other consultants. And we made sure it wasn't one of those situations where we just turned them loose and said, here's keys, go do it. We made sure that they looked at every closet, they went on every roof, they looked at every crawl space so that we could quantify everything that they need. And then the second part of this, and again, I'm just going to touch on one thing. The final report's a big part of it, but cost implications, all this information was taken and there's kind of 2 estimations that go on. There's one by the team that took all the data in, and you kind of do a preliminary kind of high-level estimate. But we also hired a consultant, a cost estimator, a professional cost estimator, to look at all of this and assess the value of it, and make sure that we also put things in there like inflation and soft costs and that sort of thing as we prepare, so that we can give you a final report. This just kind of breaks down. I'm going to highlight that. I don't think this, maybe it does. Yeah. There's a number here of 10,324,272. That's our overall square footage, but we wanted you to see what we have in inventory in the way of classrooms. So there's over 3,700 classrooms in this district, and there's over 3 million square feet of classroom space. Now, seems small compared to the overall number, right? But the reality is there's you think about gymnasiums, libraries, cafeterias, corridors, restrooms, support spaces for the administration, teachers, and that sort of thing. So that's still a big number, and it's a lot of classroom space. You can see how it's broken out by level.
Can I point one thing out real
Yes,
fast, and I'll be quiet after that. Go back to your one slide. So on the administrative too, some people are like, well, what are all those offices for? Remember that includes things like safety and security, school nutrition, all of those types of facilities as well. So administrative offices aren't just like this administrator building, it's all of the services we have to provide for the district as well.
That's a great point.
Does that include our diagnosticians and things like that as well?
It does, yes.
Yeah.
And I skipped over one thing. It's here, but I want to go ahead and highlight it. That star on the 13 for high schools. A lot of people look at that and say, again, we don't have 13 high schools. Well, we have 6 comprehensive high schools. Well, we have another 7 when you think about the CDPA and diaper, and the list goes ACCHS, and so forth. Right? So those are high schools. They're just smaller, they're specialized, even turning point secondary. And then, what I'm just going to point to is that lower number there. While we've done a lot of great things, still over 50% of our buildings are over 40 years old. So again, great work, but we're no longer a fast growth district. We're a mature district, and you have to begin to reinvest. Every FCI point for a building is worth about $300,000 worth of money. So we had this discussion earlier, Chris and I. If I have a building that's 7% FCI and I have another building that's 27%, those 20 points equate to $300,000 per point. So there's $6 million worth of need difference between those two schools. And I'll show you that.
Can you say that one more time?
So when we say FCI, if we have an FCI point, and I'll show you that here a bit, but if an FCI, a good one you saw, then we went to Pro. Pro has an FCI, I think 7 or 8%, correct, Chris? And because of the investment we made. But then you go to Rankin, we went to Rankin, and it was 27%. You could see the difference in your mind. You remember in your mind, we saw restrooms that needed to be completely renovated at Rankin. It was a good building, great building, right? It was very clean and it served well. But it needs a fire sprinkler system, it needs restroom renovations, it needs cafeteria and kitchen renovations, library renovations, and so, not library department, so the library's great there. But the point is it had 20 percentage points difference between Crow and Rankin, and that represents about $6 million worth of work. And ironically, that's about what we're about to take on at Rankin. So with the money that we're going to invest in that through the board's approval, we're going to take Rankin and drive it down like you saw. And I'll show you that here in a minute. So educational advocacy, what does it mean? And I won't hit all of these, but I'll touch on a couple. Size and capacity is a big deal, right? Are our classrooms sized properly? If you've been in Arlington High School and you've gone into the B and C wing, our classrooms are really tiny. Some of them are only 600 square feet size. And if you're a teacher or you taught, it's hard to do. It's hard to put 24 kids in a 500 or 600 square foot classroom, right? And so it's just it's a function of the age of the school when it was designed and built, right? We know about safety and security, accessibility and equity. We get that, right? But there's other things, aesthetics and environmental quality. That's things like lighting. Is the furniture new and is it comfortable, right? Are the desks functional for teachers to educate the kids properly? And so I've highlighted a couple of those things here because there's some big numbers in size and capacity. So, at the high school level, that could be things like fine arts. So the fine arts area is large enough. Do they have capacity for, say, in the auditorium? That's the art space. Are there gymnasiums of proper size? Do they have the right size athletic locker rooms? You could pick any number of things, and you could look at that. In our case, the high schools, what we're deficient mostly is our cafeterias and kitchens. Our cafeteria, with the exception of Sam Houston, which we built quite a bit larger back in the 2014 bond, and even some improvements we made at Arlington High. If you picture in your mind Lamar, Martin, and a few others, right? They're much, much smaller, and for a 6A high school, they're just not adequately sized, especially given our population now. Not all of our population, if you go back to St. Houston, they don't leave campus and go to the near fast food place like St. Martin's or Lamar.
That's what I was going to say. A lot of the high school kids leave.
And then safety and security. That's really going to tackle some of that vestibules, the secure vestibules, not at the elementary. We've touched on all of those elementary, but now it's time to consider secondary, high schools and junior highs. We've done a couple. Arlington has that. Gunn has a secure vestibule, right, and Rodriguez do, but the others are really deficient. And then two, storm shelters. A big part of that number is storm shelters. So when you look at the elementary, the $240 million number, that value, that's really addressing storm shelters and things. And you saw a lot of that even on our tour, or you've seen that when you toured other buildings. And then, of course, when I mentioned the aesthetics and environmental quality, again, a lot of that is we've talked a lot about furniture or refreshing furniture. We've done some, and the list actually is pretty long. Chris and I have done a pretty good inventory, but those are buildings that are 10 years old and younger, right? So there might be 12 to 15 of those, but then we still have another another 60, 61 buildings that have furniture, in some cases that may have been there, or portions of it, since the building was built first 60 years ago.
Does that number include like outdoor areas like Sam Houston? They need,
Yeah, it does.
they need shrubs and flowers and they need all kinds of things.
Yeah, and that's captured in some of these other numbers as well, like the support community spaces. But we do look at that current bill number.
One of the things that we saw the other day in the tour that we went on that was pointed out to us was that, and I'm trying to remember which school it was at, but that none of the desk and equipment had been updated since the school had been built. And that even though that they had had updates done to their campus through different on projects and different money, they were still working with really old equipment, which made the rooms feel dated, they looked dated. I did not know, and it was brought to my attention, that in all the bonds we've ever done, we've never included furniture in it. Is that correct?
Pretty much. Now, for the new, every time we build a new school, we do obviously, but there's never been any intentional focus on replacing furniture.
So with funding that we get from the state, from what we do we set aside any of our budget each year to update classroom furniture?
Most of that, I can answer for certain Roberto, most of the money that we have is for replacement furnitures, things that break and that sort of thing. But there are some matches that are granted when there's a special need and so forth. But we, not that we haven't done a lot together, right? Because we've addressed, just through this long, we've replaced all the cafeteria furniture throughout the district. That's what we've replaced all the pre-K and kindergarten furniture throughout the district at this point. So we've made some, and we bought a lot of new building, or a lot of furniture for new buildings. So we've made some pretty good strides. But if you look at Fitzgerald or Ditto, or you pick one of these older schools, right? Just for elementary to replace all the furniture in elementary is about $1.5 million.
For one school?
Just one school.
So we are not on a furniture replacement cycle like every 15 years. We're
Right.
not on that.
I know we're on a painting cycle, for example, for our classroom buildings, and they get to be painted soft. So I wondered if our furniture was on some sort of cycle. And it only comes to mind because we toured some of those older campuses the other day and see.
I can tell you, and I don't want to digress because I know we got to wrap this up here pretty quickly, but we are going to be talking about that with our capital needs steering committee. This is how we make some investments that way.
Thank you.
And then I'll go quickly with this. The utilization capacity, we've talked a lot about this over time. Overall, our utilization is at 73%. And that number, while it looks good, you want to be 85%. And so, overall. And you'd like to be 85% at each of your campuses, right? So what you're going to see, though, in this utilization information we have is that we've got some schools that are 30 days, 40%, and we've got some that are over 100, right? So we'd like to balance that out a bit, but we'd like to be higher utilization across the district. And
Kelly,
then,
I'm sorry, that last slide, where in our packets can we find more information about that?
I can find it.
Okay, we'll find it. Keep going, sorry.
and then this one, and I'm just going to touch briefly on this, because this starts to talk about the thing that we look at. So there are needs that we have, or I guess you'd say needs for programmatic needs and that sort of thing, and within their life cycle efficiency needs, right? We talk a lot about that. That's the things that nobody sees a lot of times. It's a roof, replacing a roof, it's replacing air conditioning. You might see it in the form of carpet or ceilings or lighting, but it's not always the frilly stuff, the stuff that gets people excited, right? And so, but it's still critical because it's keeping air conditioning running and keeping the building comfortable. The lighting at the right levels is very critical to planning. So we take all of those needs and we give those a score from 1 to 5, and then we have 1, this M, for preventive maintenance. And so what that means on the M is that most of that stuff that we can do in-house through work orders and so forth. And we'll even trickle over into all these categories with our team, but most of the time we don't have the budget inside of an M&O budget to handle all the needs the district has throughout the course. Yes.
So the number, I noticed the numbers here in the grand totals, and I think it's mainly from other facilities, district facilities. The numbers are different than what you have on this slide. Which one's accurate?
They're both accurate. It's just they kind of cross over because one, when you look at the FCI, one of them addresses maybe the size and capacity of classrooms and things like that. So it addresses how we might renovate or add to. This is strictly looking at things like mechanical and infrastructure.
So the maintenance priority level, not the facility condition overall, but the maintenance of some of those key functional systems of the district, that's what this is.
This plays a part in it. We have to.
The numbers on the top part are the same as what we have in the packet. The numbers on the bottom part are different, and I think I'm looking at the exact same chart.
Okay, so so there may be, in this case, what we've done is we've done some changes. So that right there, we've actually lowered some things. So we've got some of the charts. We've been working on this and refining it as we go along, and so we're in the process of doing a QC on the overall, and some of it, so we're driving some of that down. Because, for example,
so this has been vetted.
Yes.
That has not.
That's true. This was sent out prior to. So I'll give you a good example. When we originally put this together, we had in some of the newer schools like Peach, McKnight, Webb, Thornton, and Berry, there were some numbers that they were looking at those schools and attaching some dollars to those that we didn't feel were necessary because they're brand new schools. And so Chris and I have been going through and vetting that with the architect. And so we've been kind of refining that and just driving some of that down. And so we'll have a final report that we'll issue anyway.
And one real quick request before you finish up is on appendix A, B, and C. Can we get that in Excel format so we can sort those and actually into the numbers?
Yeah, we can.
So, Madam Secretary, catch that. Appendix A, B, and C.
This is probably one of my favorite charts in here, but it just kind of, it's a heat map and it just kind of shows you where our schools sit. And so we highlighted those at the top just so you can have a name associated with them. But schools like Cookin, South Davis, Little Road, which you've seen, the Service Center, Workman. In every case, it doesn't mean, for example, that while Workman may be in this area where it says you suggest replacement, Workman's a former high school, right? And with your high schools, oftentimes it's terribly expensive to try to replace a high school in general. Now, it happens. Up the road at HEB, they're replacing 2 of theirs, right? But they're doing that to the tune of about $300 million. Most of the time, most districts will reinvest, tear down parts of the structure, and then rebuild, right? And so with rebuilding a high school, you've got to have, number one, the land, which means oftentimes 100 acres or more, and then you've got to have the money for it. And so it just they're more like college campuses in some cases, and you can tear down parts of the structure and replace them. So Workman, while it sits there, I'm going to show you another slide here in a minute. We feel like Workman the bones are good enough that we could reinvest in Workman, drive the FCI down, and make it more functional for education.
Kelly, we're going to have to wrap up, so let's hit 1 or 2 more highlights here so we can get
I talked about this already, so this will be quick. We talked about Crow versus Rankin. You can see where they sit. We're making a similar investment at Rankin this year. We'll bring that project to you shortly after the holiday, and we'll start that project, and we'll do enough that we can drive it down to where it moves a lot more like Crow. Morton is a little bit of an anomaly. We've talked about this in a time or two. Morton, while it's a younger school or a newer school, it just has some structural needs that drive it up, and that's probably one of the buildings we have to consider to replace at some point in the future. And then likewise with the junior high schools, the high schools themselves. We talked about Workman, Shackelford, kind of the same thing. We could make a similar investment in Shackelford, just like we did with Gunn, and drive that down to where it looks like a Gunn. So it just takes a little bit of reinvestment. And at the high schools, I highlighted Martin for this purpose. It's a 12% FCI, but that represents, for Martin, it's about a $2 million investment or so. And if I had $2 million to invest in Martin, I could replace the ceilings, the lighting, and add the fire sprinkler to it. And we could take that and drive that down. It would change the whole complexion of that campus. And so with just it looks like a lot, but it's just a little investment. And then within all this is soft costs. So remember, if we're doing this, The numbers sometimes are a bit higher because we still have to pay architects and engineers. We have to buy furniture. We have to pay permit fees, that sort of thing, plan review fees. And so there's still other costs, oftentimes between 0 and 20% extra costs built into a project to handle things like this. And then I talked about preventive maintenance already, but that's just things that we do on a daily basis, like painting, changing out lights, making sure the plumbing is working, repairing that sort of stuff. That's good.
All right, trustees, we're going to be talking about this more quite a bit over the next couple of months with the Capital Needs Committee coming to report to us early on next semester. So we are going to move to closed session. I asked that we move directly there. We do have a closed session, and we do have on the agenda that we're starting at 6:30, and we have several recognitions tonight for student performance. So it is now 6:18, and we will recess and reconvene into closed session in the board chambers pursuant to sections 551.071 through 551.084 and 551.089 of the Texas Government Code, in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act and the topics set forth on our agenda. All right, we'll be downstairs.